Well, this is the third in my series on why I believe what I do about 2012 and applying some real scientific observations and common sense and kind of look at the situation. And it's a complicated subject, and so what I'm doing in this is explaining the timeline for the last 100,000 years or so based on some information that I got through reading and studying over the years, and kind of outlining how we get through some of the natural catastrophes on Earth and get to the point where we understand that there may be some astronomical cycle involved here, a very large-scale astronomical cycle. Now, a lot of cultures have told us that very clearly, that in fact, if we pay attention to the rolling of the planet through the heavens, that it'll be our clock and our navigation, and there are cycles that we go through. Now, when people get down to trying to explain where, the position of a certain, day or is going on to an individual life, like in our personal life, that's one thing. But we know, for example, that this big Earth, it's pretty significant. So wherever it is in the big cycle, it does mean something to the Earth. It may not mean anything to us, that the Earth is in a certain situation, but from the point of view of the Earth, it really makes a big difference. When we get closer to the sun, it's different on the Earth, and so on. So now, the ancient people have a lot of stories, and so that's what we've been looking into here. But I'm trying to document it here with some modern scientific discoveries, things that we can kind of understand based on what we know, and kind of see, what there might be some kind of rhythm here. Now, in the last segment, I was up to about, let's say 35,000 BC, a cosmic ray bombardment, approximately 35,000. They found rock paintings in Australia. End of the Neanderthal, the severe cold, 26,000 BC. Now, get this, they're getting close to a number that is around 22,000 years, 21,000 years, that is a cycle of precession. Now, from one, you can take any point on the circle of precession and say, well, that's where we start, and then it comes back to that point. Now, that's the whole big question here. Where do you start in the definition of, where's the beginning point of the calendar or the cycle? Now, so 26,000 years ago, it was severe cold. 24,000 years, beginning of the so-called Great Year precession, according to one person. 21,000 years ago, a big cosmic ray bombardment. Okay, well, that's interesting. 18,000 years ago, more cave paintings. 18,000 years, people were using bow and arrow. Now, if there was a civilization back, say, when we went back to Toba in Malaysia, that was huge and was mostly marine because they had a lot of, whatever the terrain there was, but Mount Toba blew up, and it pretty much ended that civilization. I mean, not just one tsunami. Tsunamis going every which way, plus the ash, plus the darkening of the sky, the change of the climate. I mean, it was a mess. I mean, how long would it take a civilization, any civilization, to recover from something like that? Take a long, long time. Now, we might not see anything. We might see nothing of it. 70,000 years? Now, getting back to getting a little closer here. Now, around 13,000 years ago, something really significant happened. We don't know. It was really a period of time, not just one event. But the glaciers that had been there, remember after Mount Toba had exploded, darkened the sky, the glaciers came, and for, say, 70,000 years back to, okay, so let's say 57 Some are at least 50,000 years. Oscillating ice ages going back and forth. Really rough times. Really kind of hard to start a civilization in the middle of the ice age. So people live very temporarily, in the mountains or whatever, cave paintings, so on. And then we get down to a sharp rise in the sea levels begins because for some reason, and I have it here, 12,200 years, so for about 700 years, the sea rise began to really rise. Now, anything along the coast, now we noticed that most of these people were seafaring. A lot of people lived on the coastlines, particularly. Now, the mountain people tended to survive. You notice that the mountain people in Tibet and South America and a lot of places in the world, they lived in the mountains. They lived okay. People in the great Southwest around here in the United States, well, the so-called North America. Now, an ice maximum in 16,000 BC. Again, so now the sea level is raising here. Now there's a short period of time for a couple hundred years where it sort of stabilizes there. 12,000 BC, ice sheet is melting again in Antarctic. 11,600, warming, rising seas to younger Dryas. Okay, so the seas keep on rising now. They've been rising since 13,000 BC. And they kept rising and rising, and not just like a foot, like we're afraid that if we get a 10-foot rise in sea level, it's going to mess up our civilization. What if it rose 300 feet? 300 feet, that would cover all of Connecticut, most of Connecticut, for example, in the United States. Now, interesting, 11,500 BC, the Hindu so-called Satya Yuga begins. Now, in their tradition, the Satya Yuga is when all conditions on earth for realization and spiritual advance are most satisfactory, with health, long life, and education, that people live for a long time. Now get that number, 12,000, so 11,500 BC. We're in the 13,000, we've been around now. If they say Satya Yuga begins, that's a whole other calculation that some people have gotten into, but it's interesting that it comes right about that time. Now, the asteroid impact the United States at 11,000 BC. Again, 11,000 BC, the sea level's rising even faster because the ice is melting. The mass extinctions in 11,000 BC, North America, because now the sea level's changing, everything is changing, the climate's changing radically. Things are dying off like crazy, 11,000 BC. Egyptian rock art in 11,000 BC, pottery, the so-called real beginning of the ancient Egypt and the Sphinx, 10,500 BC, according to some people's postulation. When the sea had been rising and rising, and maybe it got to the point where it stabilized, and they finally decided they're going to build. Now, I have to go to the next segment now, because of the YouTube limit.